You set foot on foreign soil. Only this land isn't ruled by any country or government. In this land we celebrate music. In this land we celebrate games. In this land we celebrate those who compose video game music. Welcome to the VG Embassy. Welcome and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the VG Embassy. This is a show centered around video game music and the amazing online community of fans and podcasters that enjoy it. My name's Ed, and on each episode I'll take the role of Prime VGM Minister and invite a guest VG Ambassador onto the show to share with us their own video game music culture. Or I may share a part of my culture on a solo show. And today's VG Ambassador, you may recognize him as the patron saint of VGM podcasts, as I announce at the end of every single show. And we were just talking before we started recording, probably like close to 1.5 to 2 years since he's been on the show, so he is well overdue for an appearance. Alex, the messenger, welcome back to the embassy, sir. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Ed?
I'm hanging in there. It's been a wild couple of months. We're still in quarantine, just to timestamp the podcast so everybody knows what's going on here. You and I have been working on this show, which is technically going to be your VG Ambassador patron reward forever, and things kept getting pushed back. The game that it was supposed to be like kind of focused around kept getting pushed back, and then we were going to do it with a guest who doesn't have his own recording equipment, so it was going to be me and him, and then you remote, and then quarantine hit, so now we can't have him with us. So we've had to delay it again. So I'm glad we put this show together because this is a way for us to hang out, do a show, still have some fun together. What are we talking about today, Alex?
We're going to be talking about the Nintendo GameCube.
Yes. So kind of following the console spotlights that I've kind of fallen into doing lately. It wasn't really a planned thing, but I started off, I did the Neo Geo CD and then the 3DO, and then Chris Murray wanted to do a PlayStation 1 episode, and then Ben and I did that Katamari episode, which kind of covered a whole bunch of different systems, and then here we are talking about the GameCube. Now, the GameCube is not a system that I have a heck of a lot of nostalgia for. I did own it alongside a PS2 and an Xbox, but I think those two systems got way more play than my GameCube did. But Alex, from what it seems to me, you have probably a lot more nostalgia than I do for this one, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I could best describe the GameCube as my childhood. So I mean, that is one thing though, like there is quite a bit of an age gap between you and I.
That's right. So I think a lot of those games that came out, and a lot of the games that maybe we'll be talking about are maybe a little more geared towards your age bracket at the time. I mean, the PS2 definitely had more grown-up games going for it. This was like the tail end of Nintendo's kind of wholesome, family-friendly, like no M-rated games methodology, and they started towards the end of the GameCube life, they started bringing in a couple more of the mature stuff. But I don't know, for me it was just like the PlayStation 2 was where it's at. My brother was really kind of into Halo and all the first-person shooters, so he was always on the Xbox, and the GameCube was kind of like, oh yeah, there's some exclusives coming out that look okay, but we didn't really ever give it, I think, the attention that it deserved. So did you own any of the other systems from that generation, or was GameCube pretty much it for that gen?
Yeah, the GameCube was the only one.
Cool, so you probably had a decent collection of games going for it.
I did.
Awesome. I'm sure we're going to share a lot of those today. So we're going to be sharing GameCube exclusives today. So similar to the 3DO episode, these are games that can only be found on the GameCube. If they were found on other systems, they were significantly different in somehow. Although I don't really think we have any that did come out on other ones. Maybe had sequels on other systems and such. But So these are games that you cannot find anywhere else. Some of them are Japanese exclusive GameCube exclusives, so you can only find them in one country and one system. And I think we've got a couple, or at least one, that's an American-only GameCube exclusive. So that's pretty cool, too. So I don't think that we've had you on the show since you started your own VGM podcast, sir. And it is a really good one. It's a really quick kind of bite-sized show that's really fun to listen to. You want to talk a little bit about it?
Yes. I host a video game music show called a VGM Journey. I think the best way that I could describe it is just bite size. Like, you could listen to it in just 20 to 30 minutes, 6 songs. Not a whole lot of talking in between, just a little tidbit of whatever, or I make some kind of witty comment about the track or game. I would say it's a pretty easy listening kind of show.
Yeah, absolutely. I think easy listening is a really good way to describe it because you've got a nice kind of calm voice and you're pretty laid back about the whole thing, and you're just like, hey guys, here's some cool music. Some of it's been suggested by, friends and other members of the VGM community, some suggested by your girlfriend, some suggested by you, so it's a good mishmash of a whole bunch of different stuff. The music's always really good quality, so at the end of the show, we'll have the spots that you can go on the internet to find a VGM Journey, and then of course I'll have links to all the social media in the show notes, and I think you guys should really check it out if you haven't. So, that being said, let's move on to some GameCube facts. In case you didn't know, the GameCube was released in 2001, and it was developed and sold by Nintendo and designed in partnership with Foxconn. It was about $200 at launch. It features a 32-bit IBM PowerPC Gecko processor at 486 megahertz, which is pretty zippy for its time. The GameCube media were not your standard DVDs like the Xbox and the PS2 had. They were mini DVDs. Nintendo tried to tout the media as proprietary media, when in fact they're just standard mini DVDs. You can still buy them on Amazon. They use the same DVD format as the big ones. They hold around 1.4 gigabytes each, which was kind of a detriment to the GameCube because a lot of the ports from the other systems had to be stripped down or had to have lower quality audio or lower quality full motion video because they had to take these big 3 and 4 gigabyte games and somehow squish them into about half the size. So fortunately, a lot of the music that we have on today's show is from games that featured really high quality sounds. So we're going to hear some good quality music, but a lot of the GameCube music, especially like I said from ports, were kind of tinny and scratchy. It could play Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games through the Game Boy player. There was a expansion port on the bottom that lets you play those super cool games. Those are really sought after by collectors now. So it was cool that it did have some backwards compatibility for their handheld stuff. And then, of course, the Wii, when it came out, also had backwards GameCube compatibility. So it kind of kept people who were big GameCube fans happy with if they had big libraries, they could play all their stuff on one giant console. So, which color GameCube did you own, Alex?
There was a few points where I had several different GameCubes because I would just use that thing a lot and it would just die. But I originally had the purple one, and then later on I got a black one.
Yeah, the black one was always my favorite. I think, like I talked about with the PS2 and on the Katamari show, where I imported a Japanese PS2 before they came out in the US, we also had a Japanese GameCube, and that was a purple one. And with it, I had there were 2 Japanese launch titles that we got. It was the Resident Evil 1 remake and Super Monkey Ball. And we played Super Monkey Ball a hell of a lot because it was a lot of fun and you can kind of play it without having to know much Japanese. But the Resident Evil was so text-based that it was, even though we had played the original PlayStation 1, the remake was different enough that it was kind of hard to get around the menus and stuff, not knowing what everybody was saying and what the menus said. So we didn't play that one that much. I still actually have both of those games on my shelf, which is pretty cool. But then I later on got a purple US version and then modded it with this, it's called a Viper GameCube mod chip, and it allows you to like play homebrew stuff, and you can play backed up games on it, and you can actually hook up a USB to your computer, plug it into the GameCube, and run homebrew titles by streaming it from your PC's hard drive onto the GameCube, which I thought was pretty cool. And so that came with a nice, cool, smoky black case. And the tray on top was big enough to fit a full-size DVD instead of the little mini DVDs. So if you wanted to like burn a game to a DVD, you didn't have to go out and like search for writable mini DVDs. You can just put it on a regular size DVD, slap it in your GameCube, and still be able to play it. So I thought that was pretty cool. Usually the cover images I've been doing for these console spotlight shows, I've been taking pictures of my consoles and using them as the cover images. So if you check out VGEmbassy.com, you'll see a picture of my super modded and tricked out GameCube there with the Game Boy player underneath. Just a little bit of fun nostalgia for me there. So, Alex, I think we're ready to start on with some cool music. You've picked a very obscure game for number one. What'd you choose to bring with you today?
Oh man, I'm going to be introducing a lot of people to this not, very well-known game called Super Mario Sunshine. The track that I wound up picking for it was Rico Harbor, and it was composed by Koji Kondo and Shinobu Tanaka.
All right, we'll be right back.
Welcome back. That track that you just heard, that was Rico Harbor from the game Super Mario Sunshine, and it was composed by Koji Kondo and Shinobu Tanaka. What did you think of that track, Ed?
This is a groovy little tune. So this is kind of the like a little bit of a remix of the Delfino Island Plaza song, right? It's got that same kind of melody in there.
Yes.
It sounds like something that I always imagined it as like Dave Wise composed a Super Mario Sunshine tune. Like this is what it would sound like. This is like a very like Donkey Kong countryified Super Mario Sunshine song.
I could hear that. I never really thought about that, but I could definitely hear that.
Yeah, I mean, he always used those really bassy, like, saxophone tones and that kind of, like, jazzy little backbeat. Like, this really, I don't know, for some reason I picture Donkey Kong when I listen to this track. I have extremely limited familiarity with this game. I think I might have owned it. I don't even remember. But, I don't know, I didn't really care for it that much. I think I was expecting more Mario 64, jumping on guys and a lot of the more Mario Odyssey type stuff. And Sunshine just felt really different to me, and it wasn't really a gameplay style that I was that into. But I'm assuming because this is the first track that you're playing for the show that you were probably pretty into this, right?
This was the game that... It was my first GameCube game. It was the game that I got with my GameCube way back in Christmas of 2002. I think at the time, I liked it, but I was kind of disappointed with it because just like what you were saying, like I wanted it to be like Super Mario 64, and it was just different enough that it really wasn't like Mario 64, but over the years, I did wind up liking the game more and more.
Even like now when I'm looking at reviews, like it looks like a fun game. And now that I know what to expect from it, maybe I'll kind of like go back to it and see if it holds up. But I really liked all of the other Mario 3D games. Like I've played all the way through Mario 64, both Mario Galaxies. Mario Odyssey is like one of my favorite games of all time. So it's weird that this one kind of sits in the middle of like what kind of game is this? It doesn't feel like like a Mario game. And I know that the GameCube wasn't as popular as Nintendo wanted it to be, so I wonder if they had gone with a more traditional Mario game, if this one would have helped them out a little bit more. It's interesting.
I mean, I would say that this Mario game is my least favorite of the 3D Marios. Like, 64, Galaxy, Odyssey, it's way better than Sunshine, but I still think that it's a pretty good game. I think might be the biggest thing that people might not like about it is the difficulty. It can be punishing at times, especially compared to the other Mario games.
Is that mostly because like the control scheme is so different, or is it just because it's like not programmed well? Because there's a big difference between those two.
I think it was kind of by design, but I think sometimes the design, it could be a little unfair. I know there's like a pretty infamous level that you're in like a giant like pachinko machine, and if you screw up, you will fall to your death.
As you do in pachinko machines,
But it is a game that I think for more nostalgic reasons, means like a whole lot to me. And I still think it's a pretty decent game, but I think it might mainly be because of nostalgia. But yeah, this soundtrack though, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, anything from Koji Kondo is amazing to begin with. And there's a lot of really original pieces in Mario Sunshine that have melodies that don't really exist in any other Mario game, which is cool. Like, as we just heard, this is kind of like the motif, I guess, of Mario Sunshine, that dun 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 dun. Like, that's kind of the melody that appears in a lot of the songs in the game. And it feels kind of like Mario World, but isn't, it's not the same melody. It's got that same kind of cadence to it, though. But I really like the original Delfino Plaza tune as well, because it's a lot like this song, but it's a little more Caribbean style. Like it feels like a tropical island, which is where Mario is on vacation on a tropical island. So everything feels very bright and sunny. And then there's a lot of locations in the game where things get kind of pretty dark. Like there's some really nasty stuff going on this island. And so some of the music really follows that kind of mood. And so the soundtrack ends up being this kind of weird mix of really happy, upbeat tunes and some really kind of like cinematic, dark stuff. And I like how well they do both of them together. So it's a cool, unique soundtrack to check out.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those games where Nintendo could have easily played it safe, but they decided to take a few risks on it, and I thought it paid off for the most part, both soundtrack-wise and gameplay-wise.
Yeah, I think it's like I said, this is one of those games that I really need to go back to and kind of revisit from a new, fresh perspective instead of just being like, oh, it's not Mario, but like to actually appreciate it for what it is. So maybe that'll be one of my summer games I know Purnell from Rhythm and Pixels just put up a challenge to beat 10 games this summer, and to kind of talk about your experiences as you go through them. So maybe I'll put this on my list of one of those 10 games to beat. Might be interesting. How many times have you beaten this one?
Probably a couple times. Not 100% though. It's actually the only 3D Mario game that I just cannot 100%.
It sounds like a difficult game, so I'm ready for the challenge, I think, though. But speaking of games that you cannot 100%, the next game is definitely a game that you cannot 100% because it's in Japanese and it's online, so you really can't play it that well anymore. We're going to listen to a track called Last Dungeon from the game Homeland, which was a Japanese exclusive release in 2005, composed by Hayato Matsuo. Be right back. All right, following up Alex's very obscure Super Mario Sunshine track, there's another very obscure game. That was Last Dungeon from Homeland. That was released in 2005, composed by Hayato Matsuo. So first off, Alex, your opinions on this track. I'm pretty sure you've probably never heard this music before, right?
Oh, I have not.
So what'd you think?
I was not ready for this. I would say it was like a complete 180 compared to Rico Harbor.
That's true, yeah.
My God. I mean, where do we even begin with this? First of all, the drums, it has that very 2000s sound to me. I don't really know how to describe it, but, you know, as soon as you hear that, you're just like, yeah, that's immediately what you're thinking. It has just this very unsettling sound with the piano and the guitar. I mean, there's like that little bit that sounds kind of light and hopeful, but then it just goes away.
Yeah, it's got a lot of really interesting pieces, and I think that's what drew me to it, too. It starts off kind of sweet and orchestral, but it's also got this very electronic bass line, and then those kind of, very, like you said, very 2000s hip-hop kind of beats underneath it, almost kind of like trip-hop. And then it just kind of goes in a couple different directions, and you're like, whoa, is like a boss attacking me? Or wait a second, now I'm sad? Like, what is going on here? I thought it was a really cool, arranged piece. Like, there was a lot of really interesting musical choices, a lot of really interesting instrumentation. So I wanted to share this one because I really like this soundtrack, and I feel like not a lot of people get to hear it because the game it's an RPG that was only released in Japan, and you can play it offline in single-player mode, or you can play it in online multiplayer mode using the GameCube broadband adapter. So when you're playing in online mode, you are like, it almost turns into like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of game, where you're the game master and you create an online game for up to 35 other players. Like, it's insane. I didn't even know the GameCube was capable of this.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. So I guess you kind of build this RPG for these other online players to come in and start playing, and you set up NPCs and towns and these dungeons, and you can summon other mascots, and then they kind of like become your partners as they go through the dungeon with you. So I don't know, it's like this, and so the game has this combination of like AI computer characters and other online real characters, and I don't think you're supposed to know which one is which. So it's kind of weird. I this is just kind of going off of what the Wikipedia page is telling me. So I don't know how much of it is actually like 100% accurate, but this sounds like a game that would have done really, really well in the US. And I think the only reason it didn't come out is because back in 2005, this was a broadband only game. It didn't work with the dial-up GameCube modem adapter. So I just don't think that there was enough broadband internet in the US at this point, because Japan was ahead of us with that. So not enough people would have been able to really play this game and enjoy it. So yeah, I just thought it was really cool. The composer Hayato Matsuo, if he might sound familiar to a lot of Dragon Warrior fans or Dragon Quest fans, because he did a lot of arranging Dragon Quest music for Koichi Sugiyama, who he like basically started working for when he became a video game music composer. He also did a whole lot of other games. He did actually, there was a hockey game in here that I saw, Super Hockey 94, he composed the music for, so we could have actually played him on, that was a Super Nintendo game that came out. Did we do that in our hockey game episode, Alex? I don't remember.
I don't think so. Like,
Okay.
I feel like that probably flew way under my radar.
Yeah, we should probably check that out, because this guy's a really talented composer. He worked on Ogre Battle, March of the Black Queen, Front Mission 3, Shenmue 2, Panzer Dragoon Orta he did the arrangements for. He did all the arrangement for Dragon Quest 4, 5, and 6. So he's like one of those really top-tier composers that I don't think really gets enough recognition. And he's still making music to this day, which is really cool. And he's done a lot of anime too as well, like created entire soundtracks for anime series and movies. So I want to check out more from this guy. He seems like he's got a really good kind of handle. This whole soundtrack has, a lot of it sounds like very traditional RPG stuff, but then you also have stuff like this where it's kind of a little left of center. And so I think depending on, when the game master makes their game and they're choosing, what's in the game, they might be able to choose like what soundtracks play in what areas. And that would be really cool if you could choose like really traditional stuff, or like all of a sudden the boss comes in and you like want to play something like really kind of crazy like this. I think I would have a blast doing that, even not being that much of an RPG player. So I don't know. I don't think there's ever been an English translation, but if you are fluent in Japanese, Homeland might be something that you can at least check out. Anyways, that's all I really got to say about that. I haven't been able to play the game, unfortunately, because I wouldn't even probably be able to get past the first couple of screens. But I did check out some video footage on YouTube, and it looked pretty cool. But you got a game coming up that you can play regardless of what language you know, because it's a super fun action game. What you got next, sir?
I got something from the game Odama. This is the credits theme, and it was composed by Yutaka Minobe and Keiichi Sugiyama.
All right, let's hit it.
It's go. It's a blow that strikes me. Giving back all the arms and pride behind the dark. Sing up all the jerks and jocks up to the wall. I love Vista, Buena Vista, como esta, obvio Vista, be gone. Nintendo, Crescendo, your Nintendo of sensation is gone.
That track that you just heard, that was credits from the game Odama from the year 2006, composed by Yutaka Minobe and Keiichi Sugiyama.
What the heck did I just listen to? It felt like something more out of the end of a Quentin Tarantino movie than a GameCube game.
And knowing, like, you know, what game it's from and all that, that track is just so out of place, but it kind of just fits with it too.
Yeah, the game seems to be a little bit bizarre. Oh, just one small detail for the credits. As I was looking around, I found that the actual name of the track is Cold and Bold. Vivarium was the publisher of the game, so it's performed by Vivarium's in-house band. The name of the band is Don't Panic. They also did some music for Sega's Seaman commercial during the Dreamcast era. So the designer of the game is Yute Saito, who was also the designer of the Seaman games. So I guess that kind of makes sense that he would bring his own musical guys into the mix. But yeah, man. So what drew you to this song that made you want to play it on the show?
I just wanted to talk about this game. That was the main thing. You know, on my show, I always have these moments where I have a confession to make, and I got one right here.
I'm ready.
I've never played this game.
Oh no, it's so good. You should really play it.
I mainly wanted to bring it on the show just because I want to talk about just how weird it is.
So what do you know about it without having played it?
I know that it's a real-time strategy game meets pinball, of all things. Mm-hmm. And that it takes place in a feudal Japan setting, and that it uses the GameCube microphone.
You got it on the nose so far. Let's see. I know I'm so desperate for you to play this game that while you were describing it, I was going on eBay to look for, there's not a new in-box, but there's an in-box, very good quality copy on eBay for $19 with free shipping. So you don't have to pay a whole lot to play this game. So you should definitely do. It doesn't come with the microphone. If you want with the microphone, you can get it for $35, but the microphone is optional. But yeah, so you pretty much hit the nail on the head. The game is pretty crazy. It's a pinball game set in feudal Japan, and you are battling against this war general who is trying to like overthrow your province, and your clan has this magical weapon called the Odama, which is basically like a pinball. It's a giant glowing pinball. And so you have soldiers on the field that you can direct, and you can use the GameCube microphone to call out left, up, right, down to like kind of get them out of the way of the Odama or to charge towards the enemy. And then you use the flippers to flip the ball into the enemy encampments that you are totally like, you're rushing up the screen as you're destroying the castle walls and enemy camps and enemies. It's a really cool concept. I think it could have been done a little bit better, but it's got a really weird sense of humor, as you've just heard from this song. And I think that the motto of your clan is actually Nintendo. In Japanese translation, it means the way of heavenly duty. So like it's not only the name of the people that make the GameCube, of course, but it's also the philosophy that this Japanese feudal clan has. So they're constantly shouting Nintendo, and that's why you hear the word Nintendo in the song so much. It's like a tongue-in-cheek way. It's like obviously they're on a Nintendo console, but they're also describing their duty to heaven to unify Japan and stuff. So it's kind of well done. It's got an interesting storyline to it. Have I convinced you to go check it out?
Yes. Oh, for sure. And going into the show, I was trying to do my own research on the game, which I have to say it was a bit of a nightmare to do, because anytime I would try to look up this game, I would get like redirected into something about Barack Obama. And
Yeah.
one cool little, I guess, cut thing that I found out about the game was it originally had support for the Donkey Kong bongos.
Oh, cool.
Where a second player could plug it in, and they would, you would be able to like kind of, drum to the beats of the marching, and I guess it could boost the morale of your soldiers.
Oh, interesting. I wonder if that was like the what they were using before they decided to use the microphone. Like if you just beat on the left conga, like it'll direct your soldiers left. If you just beat on right, they'll go right. You beat them both at the same time and they go up, and if you alternate back and forth, they go down. Like that would be a kind of cool way to control your stuff, but it would be hard to play that game without making a racket, I think.
Yeah, it's not a very apartment friendly kind of thing.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, even with the microphone, because you're constantly shouting directions as well. But I think you can also, if you don't use the microphone, you can hold the button down and then use like the D-pad to emulate the voice commands you'd give over the microphone. So you don't really need to use one. You'd still have the ability to control your guys anyway. But yeah, reviews were not that great. Like EGM only gave it a 5.8 out of 10. Edge Magazine gave it a 4 out of 10. Even now, though, the Metacritic aggregation score is only 62 out of 100. So I'm not sure. I mean, I enjoyed it from what I remember playing of it. I remember, like, I think I just burned a copy of it because I didn't have access to the game at the time. But I remember having some fun with it. I don't think I played all the way through it, but I don't know. I think maybe nowadays we might have some more appreciation for it, because I think this feels more like one of those bizarre indie games that are much more popular now than back then. I mean, when the GameCube was popular, the concept of weirdo indie games wasn't really a thing, and everybody wanted to have AAA game after AAA game. So maybe nowadays there might be a little more space in the game sphere for a game like this. But yeah, I think you should check it out, because I think this is a game that you would enjoy based on what I know about your sense of humor.
I'm gonna say the concept alone just has me very, very interested in the game, and I'm sure it'll have a lot of people interested as well.
Yeah, definitely. The music is impossible to find. I don't remember whether or not there are like actual music in the game. I actually looked through the game's files and could not find anything that even remotely looked like music. Even this song, which plays during the credits, I had to get from YouTube because I couldn't find where this song was located in the game's files. So it's really interesting, and there's really no other access to the soundtrack for this game besides actually playing it and listening to it, just because it seems to be so hard to extract out of the system. So I think what this was somebody beat the game and recorded the music from the GameCube or from the emulator they were playing it on. And so that's what I did, is I just extracted the YouTube audio so we could play it on the show. But yeah, I spent like a good 2 or 3 hours trying to get the music for this game and just could not. So interesting. And I like playing rare stuff on the show too, because it's nice to show off some stuff that other people are definitely not going to have any familiarity with. All right. Are you ready to move on to our next one?
Yeah, I am.
All right. So this one, again, it's another Japanese kind of obscure title, but it might not be as obscure to a lot of people because it is a Treasure game, and I know there's a lot of Treasure fans out there. This is the endgame theme from Dragon Drive D Master's Shot. This came out in 2003, composed by Tashiya Yamanaka. All right, we're back. That was Endgame from Dragon Drive, D Master's Shot. That was a Japanese-only treasure game released in 2003, composed by Toshiya Yamanaka. Fun little track. It starts very different from how it ends. I'm pretty sure this is the Endgame theme. This is another game that I haven't played all the way through, but one of those games that I'm actually able to play enough of without having to worry about knowing too much Japanese. What'd you think of this one, Alex?
Well, this is definitely not that Odama track, I'll tell you that, but I did like it.
Much more video gaming.
I was kind of getting a little bit of a Motoi Sakuraba kind of vibe from it.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Especially towards the end, I think. I think the beginning of the track, where it's just kind of a little bit off time signature and very kind of frenetic, reminded me a lot of Norio Hanzawa's stuff, who was also a treasure composer, so I think Yamanaka was probably influenced by Norio Hanzawa a lot, at least for the start of this track. And then you're right, at the end I do feel like it gets a little bit more dramatic, kind of like Motoi Sakuraba's RPG-ish kind of stuff. So it's interesting. Yeah, I like how it takes that kind of turn in the middle of the song. I haven't seen the ending for the game, but I'm assuming either that's where the credits start rolling, or there's like a full motion video scene where things get, things change from the boss blowing up to the, everybody's happy and laying in the sun or something, and so you get more of that slower paced music. The whole soundtrack is kind of like this. It's more like the beginning of the track, where it's a little bit faster paced, very video game sounding. This game is kind of like what it sounds like, Dragon Drive. You're flying on a dragon. Some of it is kind of similar to Panzer Dragoon, where you're kind of flying in a straight line and you can move to the left and right and shoot enemies in front of you. Some of it is free roaming, where you are flying around a city, taking down targets, kind of similar to like Stellar 7, like I was talking about in the 3DO show. You got a free reign within this kind of smallish area, and you got a radar where you can take other enemy dragons down. And then some of it's kind of like a boss fight, where you are stable in the air, like you can't move, but you're kind of locked on to this other boss dragon. And so you are kind of parrying back and forth with fireballs and different attacks and like dodging their attacks. So you don't really have to worry about moving around so much. It's just kind of you and this other dragon kind of circling around each other and attacking. So it looks really cool. It looks like they really kind of change up the gameplay significantly within this kind of flying on your dragon concept. And I mean, that's treasure for you. They really like to play with different styles of gameplay during their games, especially when they got into the more 3D games on the Dreamcast and the GameCube, etc. So I don't know, have you ever even heard of this one before?
I have not.
I think it's based on a Shonen Jump manga, and then there was a couple of games based on this, and there was also an anime series as well. So I have a feeling like if you watch the anime, or if you read the English version of the manga, you could probably play this game and figure out what the heck is going on. But for me, there was just a bunch of anime characters shouting at each other, and then they would get on dragons and fights. So there wasn't a lot of context for me to figure this one out. But the gameplay was solid. The frame rate was very smooth. The graphics were good. This is another game that probably could have come out in the States. As far as gameplay goes, I think the American and European audiences would have enjoyed it, but there's just so much dialogue and people shouting at each other. So I think just the amount of translation work they would have had to have done, and the fact that the characters were unknown in English-speaking territories, probably made it not a good choice for them to bring over, which is sad. This is another game that, if you have the ability to play import games, you should definitely check out, because I was having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, I was going to say that the source material, it kind of seemed like it was a bit niche. They probably were thinking it wasn't going to do well over here, so...
Yeah, of course. And, the protagonist is this kind of high schooler who learns he has powers, and he can talk to dragons, and then there's a bunch of evil guys and all his school friends, and I'm getting their powers, and it's kind of like almost like a Power Rangers with dragons kind of a deal. And then you have this little tiny dragon that, not little tiny, but probably the size of like a small dog, and he's like your pet, so he's like the comic relief for the whole thing. And then he can fly around, you can grab onto his legs, and kind of like use him like a paraglider. So there are some parts of the game where it's like that. So they kind of build a lot of the stuff that they do in the anime into the game, which I thought was pretty cool. So anyways, kind of a neat game, an unknown treasure game to a lot of people in the States. Probably not a lot of people have checked this game out because the title is just so weird. Dragon Drive D-Master Shot. Like, it doesn't really... I wouldn't know what to expect from the game if I hadn't seen it on a pretty short list of GameCube exclusives and just decided to check it out and listen to the soundtrack. So, but I want to move away from all these obscure games that I've been sharing and get back into some popular ones with some really incredible soundtracks. Alex, I believe your next game fits that description quite well.
Yes. I got something from Kirby Air Ride.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it. It's a pretty okay game. That's all I will say about that for now, but the track that I have for you is Legendary Air Ride Machine, and it was composed by quite a handful of composers. We got Shogo Sakai, Jun Ishikawa, Hirokazu Ando, Tadashi Ikigami, and Akira Miyagawa.
All right, let's hit it.
That pretty cool track that you guys just heard, that was Legendary Air Ride Machine from the game Kirby Air Ride. It came out in 2003, and it was composed by Shogo Sakai, Jun Ishikawa, Hirokazu Ando, Tadashi Ikigami, and Akira Miyagawa. What did you think of that, Ed?
I thought it was fantastic. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Kirby music, as you may be aware of. I did do a whole show on it myself, especially soundtracks that Jun Ishikawa and Shogo Sakai worked on. So this hits two of my check boxes as far as awesome game music goes. I was trying to figure out whether this track was composed. I'm not really familiar with Tadashi Ikigami and Akira Miyagawa, but this to me sounds like a kind of very militaristic, very heroic version of Green Greens, but with a little bit of the Mother 3 Pig Mask March mixed in, which might mean that it was composed by Shogo Sakai, because it has that kind of marchy feel that he has in a lot of his Mother 3 tracks. But it also could be Jun Ishikawa because he wrote the original Green Greens and maybe he was just redoing one of his tracks. So I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence between who I think may have composed this. I wonder if there's a retail soundtrack somewhere that has individual composition, because I'd like to check it out. But that said, I really like this track. There's a lot of music on this soundtrack that I prefer more because there's a lot of stuff that I absolutely recognize as being from Shogo Sakai. That's the stuff that I really kind of glom onto. This one is kind of like a short, sweet little bonus track that kind of pays homage to a little bit of the Kirby stuff. So is that kind of why you picked it?
Yes, and I wanted to pick something that you could hear on the city trial mode, which I played the main theme for that on my own show, and I would have been happy to play it on this show, but I decided I'm gonna play something different.
Keep it varied, yeah.
And actually, with what you were saying about the composers and stuff, I'm not really much of a betting man, but I'm pretty sure that it is Shogo Sakai. I think it definitely has his style.
Yeah, I think you're right. He did Kirby and the Rainbow Curse as well, and I think a lot of the stuff kind of fit in line with this. I don't know, that whole kind of lineage of Kirby music kind of mixed with the Mother 3 music. Like, I love that whole sound. It's so far outside of the music that I normally listen to, but for some reason, like, his music just really grabs me in a way that not many other Japanese game composers do. So when I hear his stuff, it's kind of like Tim Fallon. Like, I can definitely tell when like a track is a Tim Fallon track versus a Jeff Fallon track, and I can almost definitely hear when it's like a Shogo Sakai track versus like a Hirokazu Ando or a Jun Ishikawa track. So I don't know. I'm curious to see whether I'm right. I don't know if there's anywhere listed where any of these tracks have like individual composer credits, but you know, maybe Shogo Sakai will reach out someday and he'll be like, "Yeah, dude, I definitely wrote that one."
I think that would be pretty awesome.
So I just looked it up on VGMDB. There is a Kirby's Air Ride Business Trip sound test, which was a promo CD released only in Japan, and it has 7 tracks on it. It does not have this track listed. However, it does have individual track information for some of the tracks. Written by Shogo Sakai, Hirokazu Ando, and Jun Ishikawa. So I'll have to do like a blind listen with this, and I'll have to go through these tracks and see if I can pick out which composer did which. I think that would be a fun game to do, because the Air Ride soundtrack is so good. Have you played a lot of this game?
I've actually played quite a bit of this game, and it was mainly with the city trial mode. Like everything else in the game, it's okay. But the city trial mode, absolutely amazing.
What's the difference between the trial mode and the regular mode?
Well, the regular mode, you're just straight up racing, and like you can get like Kirby can get powers, and you know you could use them against the other players and stuff. But city trial is way different. You get dropped off in this sort of open world arena type deal, and you're just going around trying to either find a different vehicle or various power-ups, and like this goes on for I want to say 5 minutes. After the 5 minutes is up, all the players get dropped in a random minigame, and whatever power-ups that you get, it could either give you an advantage or give you a disadvantage, and you just go off of that.
Interesting. I'm not even sure I knew that mode existed. Maybe I think I thought city trial mode was just like a time trial, like you're just racing like to get the best time for the course. I didn't know it was like an entirely whole new game, so maybe I'll have to check this out, because I've only done the original, like the standard quote unquote racing game, which is very hard for me for some reason. I was not very good at it, but now I need to check this part out.
It is honestly like the very best thing in that game, and like the unpredictability, and like sometimes like a random event would happen, and this track specifically pops up when you gather all 3 parts for a legendary vehicle, and there's 2 of them in the game. One of them's called the Hydra, and the other is called the Dragoon. They are both absolutely amazing vehicles, and when you get them, this song plays, and you feel like you accomplished something really big.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, this is a really powerful kind of tune. So I can imagine you probably feel like you're just on top of the world when you get one of these. So I kind of remember reading about this. So like one of the vehicles has really high attack power, and the other one is just super, super fast. Is that how it works?
That sounds about right. It's been a long time since I played the game, but that does sound right.
Man, all right. So now I have to go back and play Kirby's Air Ride. So this city trial mode, is it multiplayer? Because I heard you talking about other players. So can you do that with more than one?
Yeah, you could do it up to 4 players.
All right. So I know what I'm doing with Logan tomorrow after work. We're gonna go city trial mode. Because I'll just be like, Logan, it's Kirby. He'll be like, okay, I'll play whatever. I don't care. I'll probably have to have him practice with it first before we start bashing each other. Not that I'm good at the game to begin with, but I think that sounds like a lot of fun. All right, man. Anything else you got before we move on to our next track?
No, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Yeah, Kirby's Air Ride it's a cool game with a bit of a difficulty learning curve. So if you're not good right away, kind of stick with it, and I think you'll find that you can start to get the hang of it and start to find where the fun is in the game. If anything, the incredible soundtrack will keep you sticking around just so you can listen to more of the cool music as you race around the tracks. And speaking of which, the next game is almost entirely the same description. We're going to listen to a track called Torai from the game Tube Slider. This was a US-only GameCube exclusive, but Japanese developed, which came out in 2003, composed by Mitsuteru Furukawa with guitar performance by Osamu Katsumori. All right, welcome back, Tube Sliders. That was Torai from the game Tube Slider. That was released in 2003, composed by Mitsuteru Furukawa, with guitar performance by Osamu Katsumori. And yeah, speaking of guitar performance, that was some pretty wild stuff. What'd you think of this one, Alex?
I was actually pretty surprised by it. I mean, I was kind of just expecting a little bit of like I don't want to say like a generic sounding dancey track, but Yeah, that guitar part was really nice.
It kind of comes out of nowhere too, right? Because it's this kind of disco-esque track, and then it has this weird kind of, like, it changes up quite a bit during the breakdown. And then all of a sudden this, like, rockin' squealy guitar solo, like, what are you doing in this track? Like, this, like, just some rocker just wandered into a rave and just started, like, playing his guitar. It was the strangest thing. And it kind of fits while you're playing the game, because you just don't even realize what you're listening to, because you're just focusing on the gameplay. But when you're listening to it on its own, you just realize how, like, jarring that transition from dance music to, like, rock is out of nowhere. There's no build up to it, so it's pretty cool. I enjoy this one. Again, like I said, it's a US exclusive, developed by a Japanese company called GameCube, and released only on the GameCube. And basically, it's I guess an F-Zero meets Wipeout clone. You are a floaty hover car type thing, of which you can choose several. The cool thing about the tracks is that they are all, like the name implies, tubes. And so you can race around them, but you can also race on the ceiling, you can race on the sides. So, kind of like luging almost, when you're going around corners, they really want you to slide out to the ends of the corners so that you can race around the outside of the tubes, and so you can kind of like keep your speed and not have to steer so hard into them. So, a lot of the game is kind of moving from side to side on the track to get around these corners without losing a lot of your time, and it makes it a lot of fun. There is some combat, like some weapons, but it's not nearly as much focused on destroying your enemy as like Wipeout is, especially in the later games where it's like all weapons all the time. This one just has them kind of sparsely spread out around the track, and you can use them if you need to. Usually they set it up so that there's like 2 boosts in the middle and then 2 weapons on the ends, so that you can really kind of choose which one you want to go for when you're coming down the track. And usually, like, I'll just keep going for boosts, and it seems to pretty much help me out. The weapons are kind of weak, and I don't even know why they're really in there. They don't really seem to do much to your enemy. But I think this is a game that should be looked at more. It's got really, really nice looking graphics. The courses are fun to play. The racing vehicles, ships, cars, whatever you want to call them, are really nicely designed and look fantastic. The game is a smooth 60 frames per second the whole way through. Like, it's a really well-produced game, and I'm just not sure why it didn't get any recognition at all from anyone. Have you even heard of this game before?
I have not.
Yeah, see, it's weird. Maybe it got a very limited release or something, but there's some elements to the game where it really just feels almost like a tech demo, so like I was telling you, Alex, before, maybe development got cut before they could really finish everything and just decided they were going to do a US release and just get it out. I don't know, maybe because lots of people were focused on F-Zero, and that was kind of like the big racer for the system, that nobody paid attention to Tube Slider, and so maybe they just, were developing it kind of around the same time, and that just happened to make it out first. So, I don't know. Going back now, 20 years later, this is a cool game to check out, and I feel like it's something that might be fun to play for folks looking for something in the vein of Wipeout and stuff. Did you like playing Wipeout or any of those games back in the day?
I have not, surprisingly. It does sound like something that would totally be up my alley, though. Just never played it.
Yeah, Wipeout's amazing. So any game that kind of feels like that, I tend to gravitate towards. And a big, I'm not going to say pet peeve I have, but a kind of a cornering in Wipeout is weird. Even when you're good at it, it feels really awkward. And I think that like the tube concept for Tube Slider really kind of improves on that, because you can really use the momentum of your vehicle to your advantage, and using the sides of, the walls of the tube to get around these corners. And it just feels way more natural than having to kind of dip the side of your vehicle into turns in Wipeout to kind of get around these corners. So, I don't know. The composer has done a lot of stuff as far as, I don't know, he's credited for the library sound team or sound library team. I guess after this, he did sound programming for Parodius and Vandal Hearts. he worked on the soundtrack for F-Zero Maximum Velocity for the GBA, and then immediately went to work on Tube Slider, where he was credited as composer. And then after that, I think he got a job at Sony themselves and started working as a sound library person. I don't know, he's listed as a sound library programmer, sound library team, Japan studio, technology department, sound team. So it sounds like he did a lot of audio programming and not so much in the way of composition. This really seems to be one of only 2 games that he was ever credited as composition for, which is kind of a shame. This is a really competent soundtrack. It had a lot of really cool dance tracks on it. When the game starts up, before you start your race, you can select which track you want to listen to just by pressing left and right in time before the menu disappears when the race starts. So you can kind of just play your own favorite tracks. They all kind of are built the same. They all start off very dancey, and then this squealy guitar solo comes in towards the end on almost every single track. So not exactly original and dynamic as far as the soundtrack goes, but if you like the combination of the squealy guitars and the kind of very 2000s dancey beats, you might want to check the soundtrack out. You might enjoy it. All right, so I am done talking about Tube Slider, aside from the fact that you should probably go check it out. It's got to be a cheap game because, like I said, like even hardcore GameCube fans like you, Alex, have never even heard of it before. So, might be one of those hidden gems that might give you some entertainment for a while.
I'll definitely have to check that out.
Yeah, for sure. All right, what you got next for us?
I have something from the game Swingers Golf, and that's Swingers with a Z.
Sounds kinky.
This is the Wakakusa GCC Spring theme, and it was composed by Shinji Tamura.
4.
That track that you just heard, that was Wakakusa GCC Spring theme from the game Swingers Golf. It came out in 2002 for the GameCube, and it was composed by Shinji Tamura. I thought that sounded pretty nice. What about you, Ed?
That was a nice change of pace, for sure. Yeah, definitely a nice change of pace from a lot of the energetic tracks that we've had going on. You know, golf music just is, by nature, extremely relaxing. And this one had maybe a little bit more energy than I'm usually used to in golf games, but it also had this kind of very, I don't know, countryside kind of feel to it. I really liked that kind of, I don't know, it almost felt like a cross between like a banjo and a acoustic guitar kind of a rhythm section going on. So it was fun stuff. Really nice little energetic beat to it. I haven't played this game myself, but from the box art, it looks like a pretty like crazy raucous golf game. But this music doesn't really seem to feel like the game looks. So is the game less crazy than it seems like on the cover?
I kind of watched some gameplay for it, and I think the character designs are a little crazier than what the game actually is, because it's just straight up golf.
Man, that's like a bait and switch. That's terrible. I know the game was called Ace Golf in Europe, and they kind of did away with the whole kind of crazy golfer thing. So, yeah, maybe the whole swingers golf concept was just kind of a ploy to get American crazy audiences into it. Like, I don't know what they thought people would want out of a golf game. Like, there are people who just want calm golf games in the United States. You don't need to lie about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, I only really looked into the game just because of the kind of silly sounding title, and also the trying to be hip and cool Z in the title. So I was expecting something crazy.
Yeah. Let's see. It just got average reviews. Game Rankings gave it a 70%. Metacritic score is a 72%. And yeah, man, it looks really not crazy. It was developed by Telenet Japan, published by Eidos, and there's nothing in it that is really crazy at all. It's just normal characters playing normal golf, yet on the cover of the US release, there's like this dude that looks like Hulk Hogan, like trying to like smash a ball out of a sand trap, like with this angry look on his face. And all these screenshots are just like these normal kind of low-res anime characters playing golf, man. What a horrible bait and switch that was.
Yeah, like I was expecting like, I don't know, this guy like gets in your face and stuff, and he's like, oh yeah, you suck and all that, but it just, I mean, the little bit that I've seen,
You call that a birdie?
the little bit that I've seen of the game, you don't get that at all.
Yeah. Oh well, there was a combat golf game that came out, and there was Ninja Golf on, I think that was the Commodore 64. So there were some kind of action-oriented golf games, but I don't know. Hot Shots Golf has always been my favorite, and I've always just kind of stuck with that. So if I had seen this, A, it was a GameCube exclusive, so I probably wouldn't have been too much interested in it, but B, knowing that Mario Golf was also on the GameCube and having all the Hot Shots Golf games on the PS2, I think this probably would have gone under my radar anyways. But that said, the music is really good. I really enjoyed it, and it makes me want to listen to more of it. In kind of, I guess, you know how Motoi Sakuraba does a lot of golf games. He does the Hot Shots Golf series. He did the Mario Golf series. Shinji Tamura is kind of similar in that he's an RPG composer that also does, I guess, some golf games. He's most popular for doing the Tales of Fantasia, Tales of Symphonia. So a lot of the Tales games he's written music for. So I guess he's kind of an RPG dude that also does golf once in a while as well. It's kind of a weird parallel between the two composers.
I mean, I kind of did get a little bit of a Mario Golf vibe, in this track.
I can see that, yeah, definitely. Especially with those kind of acoustic guitar strums. Like, that really has that same kind of feel that a lot of those Mario Golf games did.
So, I mean, they both kind of try to go for a bit of a, I would say, like a calm but fun kind of vibe at the same time.
That's a perfect description. Calm but fun. I think that really kind of sums up almost all the Mario Golf and Hot Shots Golf soundtracks, and it really seems to fit this one too. All right, so are you ready to move on to the next track?
Yes, I am.
All right, so here's a surprise composer. This one is from the game Amazing Island. It's called Battle Royale, from the duo of Yuzo Koshiro and Motohiro Kawashima. Let's hit it. That was Battle Royale from Amazing Island, released in 2004, only on the GameCube, composed by Yuzo Koshiro and Motohiro Kawashima. Very interesting song. Alex, what'd you think of this one?
I was actually pretty surprised by it. I kind of got a Streets of Rage meet Kirby kind of feel, especially like the beginning of the track.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that, for sure. I have this weird kind of headcanon for this song where it's like, Yuzo Koshiro's like composing this track, and he's like, all right, I'm going to do this in the style of like Etrian Odyssey and a lot of the RPGs, and he's like just making this kind of like friendly, nice track with this kind of Streets of Rage beat behind it. And then halfway through, like Motohiro Kawashima comes in, and he's the guy that did like all the really hard techno stuff like on Streets of Rage, and you can hear a lot of that in Streets of Rage 4 as well. And he's like, no, man, what are you doing? Give me this track. And so he takes it, and he's like, that's where you get at the end where it's like, like it just goes like, it's like a schizophrenic kind of track. It's got two very different parts to it. And I feel like you get Koshiro at the beginning and Kawashima at the end, and they kind of just mix together to this like Japanese peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I guess is the best way to say it. I think they sound really good together, but they're both very, very different kinds of tracks. So I really wanted to share this one because it's like such an oddity. It's this weird, the game it's like half Pokemon, half Mario Party, where you end up on this island. It's kind of like a 3D RPG-ish kind of a thing. You walk into this cave, and the creatures there create a unique like monster partner for you based on some questions that you answer. And you can customize it a little bit after they create it. Sometimes it'll look like a horse, or sometimes it'll look like a dinosaur, or sometimes it'll just look like a weird kind of combination of parts. You become this monster when you go on these adventures to beat this kind of generic enemy that blah 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 wants to take over the world, yada yada yada. But all of the fighting that you do are Mario Party style mini games where these monsters kind of battle each other in different contests of superiority. So I don't know, it's really interesting. It's a really cool concept that I don't think got pulled off very well. A lot of the mini games are just kind of boiled down to how fast can you push the A button. So they weren't really creative with that, but I think they were really trying to kind of capitalize off of like the Digimon, Pokemon craze, but then also trying to like build in kind of like the popularity of the Mario Party series at the time. I don't know, it might be worth checking out if you're interested. It's got a really cool soundtrack. Like I said, it's these two composers. So if you're a fan of the, Streets of Rage stuff, you'll hear little hints of that throughout. This was kind of before he started getting into a lot of the RPG-ish kind of music, so it does have a lot of danciness going on with it. Does this sound like anything you'd be interested in playing, Alex?
Possibly. I mean, I think the concept alone sounds pretty insane.
Yeah, it was really, really strange, and I think I'm picking a lot of strange games. A lot of these GameCube exclusives were pretty strange, which is maybe why they stayed on the GameCube, I don't know, but if you were a big Pokemon fan growing up, just you in general, not necessarily you, Alex, but if you had that kind of a mindset, I think this game might be fun. Like I said, the whole deal with the mini games, but because it's kind of an RPG setting, it's all single player. So you don't really get to have fun with playing a lot of these mini games with your friends. You're really just competing against the computer for everything. So I don't know, maybe they kind of dropped the ball on that, and that's not why it's as good as everyone was, hoping it would be. But it's got a good soundtrack, so that's the one thing to focus on.
I'll definitely have to check that out.
Yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. And I think a lot of people maybe in more of your age bracket might enjoy it. I might have just been, I don't know, too much of an old fogey to really be able to appreciate a lot of that monster capturing kind of stuff. I don't know. Maybe that's my old age showing.
Possibly.
All right, man. So what you got coming up for your last track of the show?
Well, I'll be having my last song be the Cup Battles menu from Super Mario Strikers. It's composed by Greg Robertson and Kyle Nordman.
Ooh, strange to get some non-Japanese composers in here for a change. Let's take a listen.
Welcome back. That track that you just heard, that was Cup Battles menu from the game Super Mario Strikers. It was only for the GameCube and it released in 2005, and it was composed by Greg Robertson and Kyle Nordman.
I don't know if you remember the Power Move Pro Wrestling track that I opened up the PS1 show with Chris Murray a couple of episodes ago. I think that pairs perfectly with this track. It's got that rock guitar with that kind of warpy, kind of pulsing bass, the hip-hop beat. It's like so totally like late 90s, early 2000s rock. It fits right in that very specific niche. And I really like that stuff during that time. So this really kind of opens up a lot of musical nostalgia for me. What were your opinions on it? Like, why'd you pick this one?
I've always been kind of just big into guitars and stuff. And I mainly just picked something from this game just because, like, everything about that game is just so different than other Mario games that, like, I just find it really crazy that a track like this is on a Mario game.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, the difference with Mario Strikers is that it was developed by Next Level Games. I think they're the same guys that also did the Wii Punch-Out game. So it's not your typical kind of Japanese cutesy Mario game. This, I think they really wanted to kind of appeal to more of the European, UK audiences, especially because, soccer, football is a way more popular over there. So I think they kind of wanted to get that kind of attitude going for this game to kind of increase sales for it.
Oh man, I was actually gonna jump in and say that they are actually based out of Vancouver, Canada.
Oh, are they? I thought they were European. That's funny.
They did work on the Wii Punch-Out game and also the last couple Luigi's Mansion games. I think the big thing that kind of sticks out to me is that before Super Mario Strikers, they worked on NHL Hits Pro. If you know anything about this game, like, it's a soccer game, but it plays more like hockey. So I think they kind of just were influenced a bit by their previous game and kind of
retooled the engine for soccer instead. That's really interesting.
So I mean, like I was saying, like, it is a soccer game, but it's just got a lot of the like hockeyness, if that's even a word, in its DNA. I mean, it's got a very
like you mean it's a little more fast paced than a normal. Because I know technically the rules of soccer and hockey are kind of similar to each other, but hockey is obviously a lot more quick, with quick handoffs and stuff, and a little less like, keeping the puck or the ball to yourself. So is that kind of what you mean?
Oh yeah, like this game, it has a very aggressive attitude, and it is just like all around. It's like hockey, but it's soccer.
I think that's the best way to put it. We can leave it at that. It's like hockey, but soccer. I played this like ages ago, but I haven't played it in a long time. I remember my brother and I used to have fun playing this, and we would like to be on the same team together because we would just flip passes back and forth all the way down the field, and it was like the computer characters just could not keep up with us. And then when we got to the goal, like whoever was closest to the goalie would just shoot it in, and like just because we're going back and forth, like everyone was just too slow. So maybe we just found a way to kind of glitch out the AI, but I remember having a lot of fun playing this and just kind of like decimating the opponents as we went. Did you play a lot of this one?
I did, actually.
I remember Waluigi was a monster. For some reason, everybody wanted to be Waluigi. He just had the best kicks.
I don't really remember like much with like specific characters, like if somebody was better than somebody else at a certain thing, but I just remembered it being like really easy to get into, and it's a whole lot of fun to play multiplayer. You're just like beating the crap out of each other, trying to get the ball.
They released, there was a sequel to this too called Mario Strikers Charged on the Wii, which I think was, I don't know, I don't remember it being as fun as the GameCube version. I think I remember playing it and was like, there's just something missing from this that the GameCube version had. But maybe it's the fact that I didn't have my brother to play with when I was playing the Wii version, so maybe having multiple players is really kind of the key to having a lot of fun with this game.
I don't remember too much about the Wii one. I want to say it kind of just had like a bit of that tacked on motion controls and stuff on it. Mm-hmm. I think there were more characters to play as. Like, I think there was like more content on the Wii one than the GameCube one, but I don't remember it being as good though.
That makes sense. I think the same composers also worked on the Wii Punch-Out game too, because I kind of remember the same kind of feel in the music. They have this kind of very gritty kind of garage sound to their audio, and I really like that soundtrack too. I think I shared that in one of the sports episodes of Pixel Tunes Radio way back in the day. So, yep, this is a cool game to go back to, definitely. If you're looking to pad out your GameCube collection and you don't have Charged already, Mario Strikers is definitely a cool soccer game to pick. Especially if you're a hockey fan too, I guess. This is the soccer game for hockey fans.
I was going to say, it's the only soccer game that I even have like any kind of interest in. And it's not even for the soccer.
It's true. It's for the hockey-like soccer. And I guess this was called Mario Smash Football in Europe, which is interesting. I like how they added the Smash in there for like Smash Brothers. Kind of brings it all into the same universe. All right, so we are on to our last track of the show. Saving a goodie for the last one. This is Mission 2 from PN03. This was released in 2003, composed by Shusaku Uchiyama and Makoto Tomozawa. Let's rock. Alright, that was our last track of the evening, Mission 2 from the game PN03, short for Product Number 3, released in 2003, composed by Shusaku Uchiyama and Makoto Tomozawa. What'd you think of this one, sir?
I thought this track was pretty awesome. I kind of just said to you off mic that this was definitely a track that my girlfriend Carly would be totally into, so I know she'll be listening to this, so I hope you like that one, Carly.
Awesome. Then she's a girl after my own heart if she likes this kind of music. I am very much into the breakbeat and drum and bass stuff. This is a song that makes me think of like Rob Nichols and his taste in electronic music as well. And this changes up quite a bit too. It starts off breakbeat, but then you get those kind of like industrial drums that come in that kind of slow down a little bit. And that synthetic guitar at the end is one of my favorite pieces of this whole game's soundtrack. It just sounds really gritty, but really kind of robotic at the same time. I love that kind of balance of grit and order, I guess you could say. Kind of floats that line between like aggressive stuff and like very rote kind of dance techno music. But really good track. The composers that worked on this game, Shusaku Uchiyama, Makoto Tomozawa, are longtime Capcom composers. They've worked on the Mega Man series, the Devil May Cry series, the Resident Evil series, like all of the big AAA Capcom series these guys have done tons of music for. So it makes total sense that this soundtrack is also kind of like top-notch production and composition. PN03 is a game from Shinji Mikami, who is the creator of like the Devil May Cry series, and the game has a lot of similarities to Devil May Cry, but I guess during development it was a little too much like Devil May Cry, so they really tried to pull the reins back a little bit and try to focus more on defense and how you react to your enemies' attacks, almost kind of like if you're familiar with like Aikido, where the martial art Aikido doesn't really have any offensive moves. It's all about waiting for the enemy to attack you and then using his balance against him or throwing them over your shoulder or something like that. You're not really doing melee combat like Aikido, but you're taking enemies' attacks and deflecting them back and stuff like that. So it's kind of a different way to play like a Devil May Cry kind of game. So I don't know. Have you ever played this one?
I have not.
It's got kind of middle of the road reviews. So I think, according to what Mikami said, they kind of rushed development on it, which I think Capcom was kind of famous to do, which was unfortunate. There's a game called Vanquish that came after this one, which was a lot better, and Mikami said that Vanquish wouldn't have been made if PN03 wasn't rushed out the door. Like, these are the concepts. Vanquish was the concepts that PN03 should have been had he been given the time to make a proper game. And so, like I said, the game looks really good and it sounds really good, but didn't really have the time behind the development to really kind of polish it up into a good game. Like EGM gave it a 5, Game Informer gave it a 5 out of 10, GameSpot 5.1 out of 10. It didn't really gain above like 50% ratings in almost any of the reviews that it got. So kind of unfortunate. I wanted to pick this one because A, it gets overlooked because it was like one of those really hyped titles that just kind of fell flat, but doesn't get the recognition for the really good electronic music soundtrack that it has. And like I said, this is one of my favorite tracks from it, and you can't get this game on any other system, so it's worth just getting it to listen to the soundtrack alone, or at least finding the soundtrack online and giving it a good listen. I think Carly might enjoy the rest of this one too if she liked this one.
Oh yeah. I actually kind of did look into this game a little bit for research, and yeah, I was getting kind of Vanquish vibes from the gameplay and like the look of the game. I guess this game was part of the Capcom 5, which were 5 games that were being developed by Capcom, and they were supposed to be exclusive for the GameCube, and this game wound up being the only one that stayed exclusive to the GameCube.
Interesting. I wonder if that's because of sales numbers, where like the PS2 had like a way bigger market share, and so, you know, they decided that they just wanted to reach more audiences by branching out to that console rather than keeping it on the GameCube.
Yeah, Resident Evil 4, this game is not.
That's right, that started on the GameCube, right? And then it got ported over to the PS2 like way afterwards.
Right.
Very interesting. So I guess during the planning stage, this game was originally going to be a war game, and then 5 days into development, they made a prototype, and Mikami was so unsatisfied that he was like, nope, just screw it. We're going to do another Devil May Cry, but we're going to put a woman and it's going to be sci-fi. he basically took everything Devil May Cry was and is like, let's just do the opposite and keep the gameplay style the same. So it's kind of really interesting to like just turn a whole game on the dime like that. And I guess it wasn't a decision that really worked in his favor, unfortunately, but you know, Vanquish was a little bit more well received than PN03 was, so at least he got to see his vision through towards the end of his dabbling with this kind of gameplay element. But yeah, I mean, I've played the game a bit. It's a bit stiff, and the constant dodging and parrying gets a little bit tiresome after a while. So when there's many more games of this style to check out, there's not a lot of reason to really hang out with this game for too long. It's got nice environments and nice graphics. It's one that you like look at and you're like, this game could have been so good if, and then your list of ifs is like 3 pages long. So sorry to go out on not a fantastic note, but there are a lot of really good Nintendo exclusive games that came out, you know, for the GameCube. And I think we kind of wanted to maybe feature some of the games that weren't so popular, just because, like, everybody knows Mario Kart. Everybody knows a lot of the other Zelda games that came out for the GameCube. So we can save those for a more Nintendo-oriented episode. I feel like when I do these console-specific ones, I really want to kind of dig deep and pick out some games that people might not have heard of. And even though they might not be worth playing, they have soundtracks that are worth listening to. So hopefully you guys found some cool stuff that you might want to check more out of. And Alex, I hope you learned a little bit more about your favorite console as we went through the show.
Oh, yeah, I did. I was actually pretty surprised on some of the stuff that I learned. I thought I knew everything, and turned out I did not.
It's always fun when you can realize that there's extras behind the curtain that you didn't even know about. But speaking of extras, I would like you to talk a little bit more about a VGM Journey and some of the other stuff you have going on the internet. So if we want to listen to more of your podcast, where can we find you?
You can find me pretty much on all the major podcast services, like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. You can find the show on Anchor. I mean, Anchor was pretty much just the big reason why the show even exists. You can also find me on Twitter at VGM Journey. The inbox is always open. If you want to request something for the show, just send me a DM. I will put that on my list.
Awesome.
You can also find both Ed and I on VGM Podcast Fans on Facebook. It's just a bunch of VGM podcast lovers just hanging out and talking about VGM and whatnot. It's a really good community.
Yeah, you can check out that group by going to facebook.com/groups/VGM Podcast Fans. And yeah, a lot of other video game music podcasts will post new releases for their shows there. A lot of people will just share their favorite video game music and start discussions about it. So it's a cool place to hang out. There's a lot of really nice people there. A lot of them have been previous VG ambassadors on my show, or have shows of themselves, or just really like listening to game music, which is kind of how you started, Alex, and then branched off into your own show, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Just kind of going from being a huge fan to being one of the guys, pretty much.
One of us. No, but it's great. It's great that so many individuals in the community that started off as listeners have decided to start their own shows. Guys like you and Volt Supreme, there's like coming out with really, really good shows, and it's just, there's so much video game music content out there. And like I said before, even if two shows have the exact same playlists, how two different VGM hosts can go about presenting that music will make the shows feel like entirely different experiences. So I don't think there's any limit to the amount of creative energy that can come out of having all of these VGM podcasts together in one place. So it's really quite excellent. And of course, there's the amazing community that supports all of us doing these VGM shows. First of all, a big thanks to Dread, aka Trevin Hughes, for the podcast theme song, and Indira J for the VG Embassy art. You can check out the VG Embassy at Twitter, at the VG Embassy. You can head over to facebook.com/groups/the VG Embassy and check out our Facebook group. You can head over to thevgembassy.com and check out our widget on the right-hand side of the page to jump over to our Discord group, where we have so many cool people hanging out. Alex is one of them, as well as just about every other guest I've ever had on the show also hangs out in the Discord, as well as a ton of friends and other VGM listeners. That is a great place to hang out as well. And our Patreon would be at patreon.com/the VG Embassy. And you can check out our tiers and find out how you can take a part in the development of the show and help improve it. Now, I'd like to thank our Patreon patrons, as usual, at the Taurus level. Cameron Childs, a.k.a. Bruce Irons of the Mad Gear, Michael Bridgewater from the Forever Sound Version VGM podcast, Donovan Orofino, and Chris Murray. Our VG emissaries Chris Myers, John Jekyll, a.k.a. Mix6 Masters, Ben the Dyad Dishman from the Dyad Presents, a VGM podcast, Chris Steenerson from the VG Jam podcast, Jordan Worma from the Table to Stage podcast, David Parrish, Bedroth from VGM, a Very Good Music podcast, Gannon11, a.k.a. Mike Stark from the Norwalk Gamer Symphony Orchestra, and our audio attaché members Cameron Worma, Carlos from the Heroes 3 podcast, Scott McElhone, and Dan Lawton from the Village Persons podcast. I have so many podcasters on my podcast list, it's not even funny. Our special agent, Volt Supreme from Volt Supreme's VGM Dream Steam Machine, Muddle Madness, and Ryan Steele. And of course, our VG ambassador, both in Patreon style and today, the patron saint of VGM podcast, Alex, the messenger from a VGM Journey podcast, which again, you will find all of the information regarding his show in our show notes. Alex, thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. I think there's a lot of games in here which I feel like going back with a more mature game palette, I might be able to enjoy more than I did when I was kind of a surly teenager, just liking all the mature stuff that was on the PS2. So I really appreciate you bringing a lot of cool exclusives our way.
I want to say thank you for having me on this show again. I gotta say, it's been like way too long.
It has been, for sure.
Yeah, the GameCube, it's just one of those systems where there's a lot of gems that, you could find just buried in that library.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we unearthed quite a few of them tonight, especially soundtrack-wise. So, we will get back together again to hopefully be able to fulfill your Patreon tier reward before the Patreon year is up in August. We'll see how that goes. If not, we'll find some sort of a workaround and get some stuff done. But I do appreciate your patience, and when the show does come out, it'll be a face melter. I will just say that, right?
Hey, if it's gonna take another, couple years to do it, I'm sure it'll be worth it. It's a real good one.
We'll just have more content for it by then. That's all.
Oh yeah.
All right, so we'll be back in another 2 weeks with another cool episode of the VG Embassy. Good night, everyone.
Have a good week.